Morning to you all.
Good morning.
Am I audible? Dear participants, good morning to you all. Am I audible? Sir, good morning, sir.
Namaste, sir. Namaste.
Can we start, sir?
We can start.
Okay. Good morning to you all. On behalf of the Department of Commerce, I have great pleasure and privilege to welcome our Professor, Dr. P. Mohan Reddy, sir, to this great session. I welcome you, sir.
Namaste, sir.
I would like to welcome our respected participants from all over India to this great ICSR-sponsored capacity building program on data analysis and research methodology in social sciences through virtual mode. I would like to say something about our honorable professor and research person, Professor Dr. Mohan Reddy, sir. He is a professor and head the Department of Commerce, Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati. He is highly dedicated. He is working hard for the welfare of the students. The professor has 29 years of teaching experience and 20 years of research experience. The professor played an active role in revising and updating the syllabus to make it useful for the students as a member of Board of Studies in SV University Tirupati, YV University Kadapa, SK University Anandpur, Dravidian University Kuppam, Government College for an Autonomous Kadapa, Kadapa University Karaikudi, Madras University Chennai, and Vidya Niketan, PG College Tirupati, and professor is helping in designing curriculum for add-on courses on financial domain, merchant banking, foreign exchange management, and professor as a member in Research and Development Association, Jaipur. Professor is a life member, Indian Accounting Association, Institute of Indian Banking, Mumbai. Professor as a member All India Commerce Association. Professor is acted as life member, Indian Red Cross Society, AP State Branch, sir. Really amazing, sir. I am the Red Cross coordinator, Red Cross coordinator, zonal coordinator, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yesterday, we organized a lot of camps in Karaikudi, sir. We are helping by our volunteers, sir. Really, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Really, it is a proud one, sir. We are really appreciating you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, Professor, again, a life member, Indian Institute of Public Administration, IIP in New Delhi. Professor is a member, Journal of Bankwest. Then Professor has published 166 publications, articles. And Professor has authored 16 books. And Professor has completed various projects. Electricity for Rural Development, a study of RESCO, ICSR New Delhi. Then Finances of Distance Education, Centers of Conventional Universities in Andhra Pradesh, UGC New Delhi. Really great, sir. And Professor has organized UGC National Seminar on Changing Dimensions of Indian Banking, Kadapa. Then UGC National Seminar on Changing Dimensions of Indian Marketing at the SVU PG Center, Kadapa. The National Seminar on Indian Capital Markets, Emerging Issues and Challenges, Venkateswara University, Tirupati. An international conference on corporate governance, emerging issues and global challenges, Venkateswara University, Tirupati, sponsored by SCSR. Great, sir, great, sir. Professor has organized a national conference on inclusive growth through Startup India and Stand Up India, opportunities and challenges in Venkateswara University, Tirupati. Sir has acted as a director of that program. Then Professor has presented 108 papers in national level seminar and 20 papers in international conferences. Then Sir has presented paper on 18 webinars through virtual mode. Really great, sir. Sir has attended various orientation programs and refresher courses. Then Professor has acted as a research person in refresher course, Academic Staff College, JNTU, Hyderabad. Then Sir has acted as research person in Refresher Course, Academic Staff College, Maulana Azad, National Urdu University, Hyderabad. Then Professor has acted as visiting professor, Dravidian University, Kuppam. Then Professor has acted as a research person, Refresher Course, Academic Staff College, Department of Commerce, SV University, Tirupati. Then Academic Staff College and Department of Management Studies, Christ University, Bangalore. Then Professor has acted as a member, peer review committee for publication of seminar articles, management studies, Pondicherry University. Professor has acted as warden in SVU, University. Then the professor has acted as chairman and member for inspection committee, Sri Venkateswara University. Acted as chairman for joint inspection committee. Then professor is actively associated with welfare and general development of institution. Then professor has a lot of administrative experiences. Professor has acted as coordinator, MS Aram, SC University, Kadapa. Then acted as coordinator, MSc Computer Science, SV University, Kadapa. Then professor has acted as coordinator, MBA, coordinator, MCA, head in charge, Department of MHRM, and coordinator of university exams. Then acted as assistant warden in Yogi Vemana University, Kadapa. Then professor has acted as coordinator, MCOM, acted as warden, acted as chairman, board of studies, acted as head of the department, then acted as member of board of studies in SV University. So really great, sir, really amazing, sir. Once again, I welcome you to this great occasion. My dear participants, on behalf of Department of Commerce, I would like to welcome you all to this great session. It's going to be handled by our Honorable Professor, Dr. Mohan Reddy, sir. Welcome you, sir. Once again, all. Please, sir. Please, sir.
Thank you very much.
And invite Professor Dr. Mohan Reddy, sir, to deliver a special address on this great session. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your warm introduction, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Respected Head of the Department of Commerce, Professor P.R. Gurumurthy Garu, convener of this program, Professor Vinayak Murthy Garu, co-convener, and professional learned colleagues of the department of Algarpa University, and other esteemed participants throughout the India. So I feel privileged to participate in this program. I thank university authorities and head of the department, Professor T. Gurumurthy Garu and Professor Vinayak Murthy Garu, for having given me this opportunity to deliver this special lecture program on case study method. So this perhaps this is the last but one program on capacity building, data analysis, and research methodology in social sciences. So this program, which is sponsored by ICSR New Delhi, and the eminent wizards have delivered the lectures on various topics relating to this data analysis and research methodology. So they have given sufficient inputs on data analysis and research methodology. And the inputs that were given by the eminent professors, earlier speakers who have participated in this program, and they have gained much knowledge and research on methodology and data analysis. And the inputs given by them are immensely useful for prospective researchers and researchers we are pursuing, and also it is the useful to the faculty also. And so the now the case study I am allotted to speak on or deliver the special lecture program on case study method. So really, case study method is an in-depth analysis or a comprehensive study, a detailed study of a specific subject. A qualitative analysis may be taken in this case study method, and it is a depth rather than breadth. So it is a depth rather than breadth. So these outlines, these simple sentences outline the significance of case study. And I have sent the PPTs. I have prepared the PPTs on case study. So there are two sessions on this case study method. So one is particularly on theoretical aspects with regard to case study, and various dimensions of case study have been to be presented on the in the first session. On the second session, the theory one case study, particular case study has been undertaken, and on how case study has to be analyzed and interpreted, and how to find a solution to the problem. Actually, research is a systematic and scientific investigation to find a solution to the problem. And more particularly, this case study method is more useful for that is it is good for describing, comparing, evaluating, and understanding different aspects. Comparing, describing, comparing, evaluating, and understanding different aspects of research problem. So that's why this case study method. So on this, how it is useful to the researchers. So that's why. So I will share the screen, and through PPTs we can have the discussion. Now I will share this now. So this is a special lecture on case study. So now, so from step by step, we can see about what is case study. So the case, it is actually qualitative analysis. There are two types of analysis. One is qualitative analysis, and another one is quantitative analysis. But in the case study, qualitative analysis involving very careful and complete observation. That means it is a complete observation of a person or a situation or any institution. But sometimes the quantitative analysis is also involved in the case study, but particularly the qualitative analysis involving very careful and complete observation. So a thorough and complete observation. In the beginning also I have mentioned that a depth analysis, a comprehensive analysis and a detailed study can be taken in the case study method. So this is what is case study. And then, so there are different dimensions of case study. So also that how the dimensions, if you see the slide, are you visible, sir?
Sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. Sir.
Yes.
So this case study, so if you see the different dimensions, facets, and angles and aspects of this case study, how case study it has different wings. So that is, so we start with the subject, and then we can gain knowledge, and also we have some evidence for this case study, and data must be gathered and must be analyzed, and research methods and methodology, and one criteria. There is a criteria we can discuss later. What is the criteria for case study, and finally, so finding a solution to the problem. So any research investigation. So we have to we have to identify the problem and what is called a statement of the problem. So from the review of literature or so we can identify the problem to a particular event or a situation, and we can design that, and then finally, having these aspects and ultimate is analysis and interpretation and deriving the findings or conclusions and revelations, and finally, based on the conclusions, and we can make the recommendations or suggestions. So these are the various aspects involving in the case study method. And then so some of authors, eminent authors have given, and experts have given some definitions with regard to case study. So systematic inquiry into an event. So any event can be taken, and that event can be systematically and scientifically investigated, or made any inquiry or related events which aim to describe the explain the phenomena of interest. So what is the interest of taking this particular problem? And so that is we can have a systematic inquiry into that particular event according to Bromley. So this is one definition given by Bromley. So then the definition, another definition given by P.V. Young. So he has given. So case study method is exploring and analyzing, exploring the ideas and analyzing of life of a social unit of that person, a family, an institution. So we can attribute. So they have given a broad definition with regard to various disciplines, various domains, and we can take according to our purpose the family or institution or cultural group or even entire community. So this is case study method. So according to him, exploring and analyzing of any situation, of any institution or a group or entire community. So that is the case study, the definition given by P.V. Young. And DAY, so he has given most research methods. So texts either ignore case studies or confuse it with other typical of with other types of social research. So when we have some texts of case study, so that either ignores case studies or confuse it with other types of. So this definition is somewhat critical that in the social research, so it sometimes there is a confusion when we have taken this text with regard to case study, that with other types of social research according to this author. And so we have certain examples. So there are certain examples with regard to case study. So the examples that are given with regard to case study, so that is, so there are social anthropological study of rural or tribal community. So we can take any example for undertaking the case study, whether it is related to social anthropological study with regard to rural areas or tribal community. We can take case study and we can we can design the research methodology and finding the problem and finally identifying the problem and finally finding the solution to the problem. And we can have a thorough examination, a thorough investigation into rural areas, the problems with regard to rural areas or tribal community. So this is one such example any researcher can take on case study. Another one is a causative study of labor participation in management in particular enterprise. So what is labor participation in management in particular enterprise? So that this is also one. So it is most relevant to even for management and commerce. So students also and our social science researchers also. A causative study. So the reasons for the labor participation and in management and a particular enterprise, what are the implications can be identified, and what is the impact of this causative study, and ultimately the gateway of recommendations can be offered or a packet of suggestions can be offered by the researchers and has taken a causative study with regard to this labor participation in management in particular enterprise. But while taking the research problem, so there is a methodology, and I don't want to go again back with perhaps have gained substantial knowledge with regard to the steps in research methodology and what are the various steps with regard to research methodology, how to design the research problem. Actually, first we have to identify the statement of the problem and review of literature, need for the study, and sample design, sources of data, and period of study, and then the scope of the study and the limitations of the study, tools of analysis, and finally chapter scheme will be given. So that is the systematic order for any type of research. So based on that, having a research methodology, we can have a detailed analysis with regard to causative study also. And another one is a study of juvenile delinquency, so that we can also have, this is also one such example of inquiry into the research problem, a study of lifestyle of working women, and a study of slum dwellers, a study of urban poor. So urban poor, in urban, so there is an assumption that in urban areas are all rich, but there are also poor in urban areas. So a study of urban poor. So that can be also taken as a case study. And what are the reasons for the poor in urban areas? So, finding the reasons and we can researcher can offer solutions to make them to elevate the to mitigate the poverty in the urban areas and slum areas also. So and another examples, a study of economic offenses. So that so what are the malpractices in economic that is system, that offenses that can also be taken as a case study, and a study of refugees from another country. So these are some examples, but some examples are more relevant to the social, more particularly the commerce and management studies, and others are other areas of social sciences. These examples are relevant for undertaking the case study. Are you audible and visible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Cool. When to do a case study? So then, so there are certain points are there when to do a case study. So one should have, the researcher should have appropriate research design. That is the basic step when to do a case study. So we cannot take all research studies as case studies, but the theme that can be chosen by the researcher as a appropriate research design. Then only then it is possible to undertake the particular research problem as a case study, and it should have an appropriate research design. And the good choice, that is good choice in a thesis or the dissertation, and researcher has a good choice in a particular thesis or dissertation, and he can do a case, he can apply a case study method, and he can investigate into the particular problem. A single subject in depth or conduct multiple case studies to compare. So we assume that case study means we have to take only one particular subject, but we can take multiple case studies also, and within the organization we can also compare the performance of an organization of that particular institution or event or social unit. We can also have a single subject in depth or conduct multiple case studies to compare. So comparison gives better results also sometimes, and why this is good, and what are the reasons for the better performance, what are the reasons for poor performance, we can identify, and we can find out we can offer, researcher can offer better solutions when he has made a comparative analysis within when you take multiple cases, and therefore researcher has an option to conduct in single subject in depth or conduct multiple case studies to compare. And another one is a case study can highlight nearly any individual, any individual or group, organization, event, belief system, or action. So it can so these events can be highlighted either the individual system or so the individual behavioral attitudinal activities or group or organization and event or belief system or action. So these are the some of the situations when case study can be undertaken. So number one is there must be an appropriate research design and a choice in the thesis or a dissertation. It is either a depth in a single subject or you can conduct a multiple case studies to compare comparison between two cases or multiple cases and derive the meaningful and purposeful conclusions so that better recommendations can be offered. And the case study can highlight nearly an individual group, organization, event, belief, system, or action. These are some of the points when to do a case study. So then, what may be revealed? A researcher can closely, so from case study, so can closely examine the data within a specific context. So this is most relevant. So it is possible for the researcher to examine the data when he has taken one case, and instead of taking different cases, multiple cases, and then you can examine the data very closely within a specific context. Then that is one aspect. Another one is examine contemporary life, real life situations, and test theoretical models may not answer a question completely. That is so that may not be sometimes may not answer a question completely. So, but these things can be revealed. So, examining the data within a specific context, examining researcher is able to examine contemporary real life situations and test theoretical models. You can take some theoretical models and historical models, and based on historical models and pre-existing theories and pre-existing theoretical situations, you can undertake and you can conduct a research, a case study research. So this is what may be revealed, and therefore that is but it will give some indications and allow further elaboration and hypothesis creation. So perhaps it may not answer a question completely. So researcher can raise certain questions. There are research questions. So there is a possibility for every researcher to raise certain research questions, like followed by the objectives and research objectives, and then perhaps the question may not give a complete answer, but it will give indications and allow further elaboration, how to elaborate in further research and future research, and what are the new vistas for prospective researchers, and there may be possible for the prospective researchers for the creation of hypothesis, and then you can test in further elaborations also. This is possible in the case studies. So these are some of the what may be revealed in the case study. So these things can be possible for researchers for close observation and in-depth and comprehensive study on case study methods. So then, why use a case study? So why researchers can go for case study? So that is, this question also arises. Why cannot you go for the complete examination of a particular problem? And why is choosing or selecting a case study method? So there are certain things. So therefore, This is a great way actually to improve learning experience. So that is it is a great way to improve learning experience because they get learner involved and engaged immediate use of newly acquired skills. So there is better possibility for the researchers to acquire a learner newly you can acquire new skills on the research and therefore to improve learning experience. So because so encourage immediate and acquire the learning skills. So that is to improve learning experience to differ from lectures or assigned findings. That is because they require participation and deliberate application of a broad range of skills. You can apply a broad range of skills instead of these lectures or assigned readings. So that is why we can use case study. That is the broad image of broad range of skills. Wide spectrum of skills can be developed in the case study method. So that is why the case study method can be undertaken. And further on is to make a difference. So there is a to make the difference between knowing and what to do, and that is to knowing how, when, and why to do. So these earlier we have seen. So what to do, to knowing how to do, when to do, and why to do it. So these are some of the situations a researcher can observe in case study method. So know what to do. So in case study and how to do, when to do, why to do it. And if you don't, if the researcher does not know these things, so there is a wrong choice of choosing case study method. He must carefully observe. So that and also he has to make a distinction between the differences, what, how, and when, and why. And then he makes the differences between these things, and he is able to choose a perfect case study method, and which is useful for all the stakeholders in the society. So that's why the why you use a case study. This is another way. So there is a how to write a case study. So how to write a case study method means there are two different methods. So to write up the case study, that is um, uh, the one is prospective method, another one is retrospective method. Prospective method means so taking the cases to determine the prospective outcomes. So that is prospective method. And another one is retrospective method. So the prospective method means so we can you can take so the individual interest or group interest or any institution to determine the research outcomes with regard to prospective research method or case study method. And in the case of retrospective case study method, it involve looking for historical information. So, for example, researcher might start with the outcome. He can start with the outcome. In the case of prospective method, he can determine the outcomes. In the case of retrospective method, there is an outcome. With the outcome, he starts the research, and and finally he find out the new outcomes. He can identify new and prospective outcomes. In the case of retrospective method, that he looks for historical information and previous information he can gather, and outcomes are there, and he starts the research with outcome. In the case of prospective means he determines the outcome. So therefore, that is the difference between prospective outcome and retrospective outcome. That method, that is prospective case study method and retrospective case study method. So there is a choice or option for the researcher. He can choose depending upon the situation, depending upon the event or research problem. He can undertake either prospective case study method or retrospective case study method. But he must be very careful whether it is pertaining to or concerning with prospective related method, related problem or retrospective related problem, researcher is able to distinguish between the problem. Then he can adopt either prospective method based on the situation, either prospective method or retrospective method. So there may be perhaps in the retrospective factor. So earlier, what are perhaps there are certain financial problems in one organization, and based on the why these financial problems have occurred, what are the reasons for the finance problems, so that there is an outcome is there. Based on that outcome, how to overcome these financial problems, we can gather the data, we can apply a retrospective method, and we can undertake the historical information and past data, and we can analyze and interpret and derive the findings and offer solutions for the problems. So that based on that, researcher can choose prospective method and retrospective method. These are the two important methods for a case study. One minute, please. We have there are different types of case studies. We have different types of case study. So then one is the collective case studies, and descriptive case studies, explanatory case studies, and exploratory case studies, instrumental case studies, cumulative case studies, and critical instance case studies, and illustrative case studies. Researcher must know. So the problem, the problem which he has chosen is belonging to which type of case study, whether it belongs to collective case study or descriptive or other types of case study. He must be able to understand. He must have to have a knowledge or have an idea about different types of case studies. And if he knows, he gains the knowledge on the different types of case studies, but he can able to complete his research properly. And therefore, the first one is collective research, collective case studies. That means involving studying a group of individuals. Research may study a group of people in a criteria setting, look, or entire community of people. So, for example, it relates to the collective case studies. That means a group of people involving, say, a group of individuals involving collecting information and undertake the research. That is collective case studies. And descriptive case studies. That means descriptive means there is a pre-existing theory. Based on the pre-existing theory, the subjects are then observed and information gathered is compared to the pre-existing theory. This is called so pre-existing theory is there, and you can make the descriptive case study, and that can be compared with the pre-existing theories, and you can identify what are the differences, and that is descriptive case study. And another one is explanatory case study. So these are often used to casual investigations. So explanatory case study means not that much serious investigations or casual investigations. Researchers are interested in looking into factors that have actually caused certain things to occur. What are the reasons for occurring? So that type of, to find out that type of studies, so these explanatory case studies can be undertaken. So that is one type of case study. So another type of case study is there. Another one is exploratory case study. So there are sometimes used as a prelude to further. So this exploratory as a prelude means as a backdrop to the earlier studies for studying further more in-depth research. This is exploratory case studies. That case studies can also be undertaken. That is in the case of exploratory case studies, there is every possibility for the researcher. So for developing the research questions and testing the hypothesis, he can raise the questions on his particular research problem. So in connection with the objectives, and then in tune with, in accordance with the objectives, or in tune with the objectives, and then the objectives are followed by hypothesis. He is able to formulate the hypothesis. So the keeping the objectives in mind, hypothesis can be formulated, and the formulated hypothesis can be tested with the different statistical tools and techniques, and that can be possible in the case of exploratory case studies. So researcher can be able to raise the questions and formulate them, and set the specific objectives, and they can formulate the hypothesis. Hypothesis can be tested with the different tools and techniques, and the results and the discussion can be made. And based on the results and discussions, then you can go for further proceedings that offer suggestions. This is with regard to exploratory case studies. Then instrumental case studies. So these occur when individual or group allows researchers to understand more than what is initially obvious to observers. So this is instrument. What is obvious? What is apparent? What is clear? So what gives the vivid picture with regard to it gives vivid picture or clear picture or apparent picture to the observers. So this is an instrumental case study. So researcher can also go for this instrumental case study, but it is more visible to the observers, and more clear and obvious to the observers what findings have been made by the researcher. So this is an instrumental case study. So this is one type of case study. And another one is that is cumulative case studies. The cumulative case studies, so cumulative means there is aggregate information. So already information is there, earlier information which is an aggregate. So all aggregate information for several sites that can be collected from different sources. There are different sources for the researchers to collect the information, and the aggregate information can be gathered, and collective information can be gathered, which is already existing, so that based on that information, you can analyze the situation, and that is one type of case study, that is cumulative case study. So that means the cumulative case studies that so the past studies will allow for greater generalization without additional cost. So there is no, so because already existing the aggregate data is available, so there may not be additional cost for the researchers. So the time being to expended or new or positively respective studies. So that means the data is available, aggregate data can be gathered, and so cost involvement is very less. So this is one type of research study, that is cumulative case study method. So another one is critical, that is instance case study methods. So these examine one or more, so for either for the purpose of examining the situation for unique interest. So for special interest or unique interest with little to no interest in generalization. So this is for instance part, for not for generalization. This type of case study method, not for a generalization, for particular situation or for particular problem. So that is a critical or instance case study method. So this is also another case study method. Here, the challenge is highly generalized or universal assertion. So it is universal assertion. This method can be used. That is critical or instance case study method. Another one is illustrative case studies. These are primarily descriptive case studies. Descriptive case studies, and these typically utilize one or two instances we can, one or two instances can be taken as an illustration or event to show what situation is like. So the illustration case studies serve primarily to make the ultimate unfamiliar and give a reader a common language about the topic in question. So that is illustrative case study. So that the common situation. So what is even show a situation and primarily to make unfamiliar and give readers a common idea or common theme about the topic in question. That means that the topic which is chosen by the researcher, it gives a common idea about to the reader. So that is an illustrative case study. So therefore, altogether there are eight types of case studies are there. So starts with collective case studies, descriptive case studies, and explanatory case studies, and exploratory case studies, and instrumental case studies, cumulative case studies, and critical instance case studies, and illustrative case studies. And so therefore the researcher cannot choose the topic when he would like to do research on case study method. He must be able to distinguish, and the researcher must acquire knowledge about the cases and different types of cases, and the topic chosen by him it belongs to which type of case study. He must be able to distinguish. He must be able to identify. Then only he will properly gather the data. He will properly the gathered data can be properly analyzed and interpreted, and he can draw the relevations and offer the sessions. If he is not able to distinguish the topic or problem chosen by him is pertaining to which type of case study, and then there may be the ultimate outcome may not be the purpose of the researcher may not be served. The outcome, the results may not be perfect. There is every chance for giving or getting wrong conclusions. Therefore, the researcher must be very careful while choosing a case study method, and the chosen topic by the researcher is belonging to which method. He must be able to distinguish. So this perhaps this slide gives a vivid picture with regard to various types of case study, and the researcher may be careful while choosing the topic on a particular case study method. Based on that, he can start with, he can design his research from method research problem, and you can take the research methodology. So this is I hope this will be helpful for the budding researchers for doing the research, for pursuing research on case study. Here, another one is criteria for selection of a case study. So then we must have a criteria for the selection of a case study. So then if you do not have a criteria for the selection of a case study, so then we must have a base or criteria for selection of a case study, and therefore we have to distinguish, and we have to differentiate what is the criteria and what are the different cases. And then we can fix the criteria for selection of a case study. Then it is possible. One is, so we can have for example, for selection of cases, the case for the case study. Often we use information based on the oriented sampling. So either you can take oriented sampling or other type of samplings. So we have to fix the criteria for selection of a case study. Therefore, what are the different criteria? We have to make. One is critical cases. Some case studies are very critical, and based on that, the research methodology is there. Another types of cases are extreme cases are there, or sometimes there are deviant cases. Deviant means so they are not coinciding with earlier cases and previous cases, and they are unique or special deviation or deviant cases are there. And there are so the other one is that is panoramic cases are there. Based on that, so therefore the researcher should understand. So these types of criteria. So the critical cases and the extreme and deviant cases and paradigmic cases. So based on that, so the he can able to understand what are the symptoms of a particular case, what are the consequences of a particular case, how these consequences of a particular case can be overcome, what are the implications of a particular case, what type of sampling can be applied, and so there are different types of sampling. So so actually here when we have taken one case, the only oriented sampling is there. So so that type of method can be applied in the case, but we must be able to distinguish the criteria. That is, one is critical cases and extreme and deviant cases and paradigmic cases. So therefore, based on that, when you fix the criteria, so the results must not vitiate the validity and credibility of the research. So it must be an exceptionally written case or a written case study when the researcher has followed the criteria. Otherwise, when he has not followed the criteria, and so the validity and credibility of the research can be vitiated. And so in order to avoid that, so to have validity and more rigor in the case of case studies, rigor, validity and credibility are most important for the research. In the case of research, case study research method, that cannot be avoided. Therefore, this should have one should have this criteria that critical cases and what are the critical cases and what are the extreme cases and deviant and paradigmic cases. Based on the information and based on the perspectives and based on the in-depth and comprehensive analysis, we can have we have to distinguish the information for the case-oriented cases in these ways. That is, one is critical cases, another one is extreme or deviant cases, another one is paradigmic cases. The other one is the functions of case study. So this method describes, so case study method describes in a case peculiarities. So number one function is peculiarities. What is peculiarities means it gives an insight into the typical or extreme cases which unique features are not reflected by the usual statistical method. So usual features cannot be reflected by common statistical method. So that is one of the functions of the case study. That is in a case of typical or extreme cases. That is number one function of a case study. Number two is so it provides an opportunity. So this is for the researcher, case study method provides the best opportunity for intensive analysis. So of many specific details and are overlooked in other methods. So if you take another methods, and because the scope for the research is very wide and wild in other methods, but there is no possibility for the researchers to go for in-depth research. So when there is a wide breadth, when breadth is more, so it is not possible for the researcher for going intensive analysis. So it provides the researcher. It is an opportunity, ample opportunity for the researchers, so that to go for intensive analysis. So it will be possible in the case only in the case of case study method. So therefore, instead of breadth, we can have in-depth analysis in the case study method. So that is another function of case study. So it also provides clues and ideas for further research also. When the researcher has gone for intensive analysis, when he has made an intensive analysis, all it gives this function gives the clues and ideas for future research or further research. Because the researcher knows pin to pin and every aspect in his case study, because the scope is not wider, and therefore possible for in-depth analysis, and it gives clues and ideas for future for further research, and it creates new vistas for further prospective researchers. So that is another function of case study. And another one is everything. So that is means studying everything about something rather than something about everything. So that is most important. So it is possible for the researcher. So studying everything about something. That means so that there is a perhaps may not be there is a possibility of 360 degrees performance, but everything can be studied in something, but in other methods, something about everything. So that is the difference between case study. Everything about something rather than something about everything. So that is the another function of case study. So researcher is able to study everything. That means he knows about everything about particular research which he has chosen. And it is also as a case study as a research method. Also, there is a possibility of for the researcher to often employs more techniques than one. There is a possibility to offer more techniques to get better results and true results in this method. So therefore, that is also other function of case study. And that means here the, it implies that is interviewing method can be employed, or mail questionnaire, and the researcher can mail the questionnaire, and you can apply the checklists and rating scales. So these are all qualitative analysis that is a interviewing method can be applied, and other method is mail questionnaire, and he is able to send the questionnaire and gather the data, and checklists can also be undertaken, and rating scaling methods can also be applied in the case study method. So that is as a case study. So more techniques can be applied in the case. That is the advantage for the researcher when he has applied more techniques, and he can so he is able to derive the purposive or results. Another one is the generic. That means to ascertain the generic development of a social unit under study revealing. So the factors that mold it for life. So in the case in that particular situation. So in the case in this situation, so the one author has described it. Perhaps Burgess termed the case study method as the social microscope. Social microscope. In social studies, so he has termed it as a social, that is microscope. Microscope. So that we can understand. So what is microscope, and how we can analyze the situation in the microscope studies. That is, he has described it as that is case study method as a social microscope. So that is an advantage, and that is one function, that is generic function of a case study. In that situation, the Burgess has described it as a social microscope analysis. Another one is valuable, that is diagnostic. So it is valuable. It is this method is valuable for diagnostic and administrative and therapeutic process. So it is for both valuable for that is diagnostic and the administrative purposes, and other purposes also. So it is valuable for diagnostic purpose. That is one of the functions of the case study. The last function of the case study method is it develops innovative ideas. So that is innovative ideas. So as already pointed out that in intensive analysis, it provides clues and also it is provides an opportunity for intensive analysis, and therefore when a researcher has concentrated everything about something, automatically the innovative ideas you can it is there is every possibility to develop in the case study method an innovative ideas and new concepts and are testing existing concepts. So it is possible for him to develop innovative ideas. So that is by innovative ideas, what will happen? No, that so that the new concepts and are testing existing concepts that these that it is a value addition. Actually, this case study method provides when we have an innovative ideas, it is a value addition and valuable contribution to the existing horizons of literature. So that is a better the function of a case study. It provides value addition and a good contribution, and it becomes a good piece of work, research work, and to the it adds to the existing horizons of literature, so that because it develops innovative ideas. So these are some of the functions of case study: peculiarities, intensive analysis, everything, and as a research method, and generic, valuable for diagnostic, develops innovative ideas. So these are the some of the functions of case study. So then characteristics of case study. So these are the some of the characteristic of case study. Unit of study: an in-depth and detailed study of the unit, statement of phenomena in its natural environment, representation of emic and ethic perspectives. So the emic and the entire perspectives we can observe. So the representation. So that is this is one such way. So in the case of unit of study, so that is according to Giddings. So the author on this case studies he has given, it can be a person or a single incident of his life or whole nation or empire or historical age. Unit of study means research. He has given according to his he has given some examples that unit of study, well, any unit he can take, the researcher can take for his case study according to Giddings. So another one, so that is an in-depth and detailed study of the unit. So that is it is a detailed study. Already it is mentioned that according to Goode and Hart, it is an approach which views any social unit as a whole. So that Goode and Hart also the who wrote a book on the research methodology also, that he said that it is an approach which views a social unit as a whole. So that means an in-depth and detailed study can be taken when you have seen that as a whole unit. That study of phenomena in its natural environment, so that is individual set of behavior are more complete in itself and separate from the life or a person as a whole. These are some of the examples. So that the phenomena, any phenomena can be taken in the nature environment for the case study. So this is one such characteristic. The representation of emic and ethic perspectives are also can be one of the characteristics of case studies. Then case study versus survey. So so often there is a confusion for the researchers who sometimes not for all but some future researchers are those who have entered in in the research field. They have some often confusion that what is case study or what is survey. Therefore, we must have to understand, make a distinction between what is case study and what is survey, and how it versus between case study versus survey. So there are four aspects we can observe closely from make the differences between case study and survey. So there are 4 points are there. One is investigation. So that is in the case study. So there is an intensive investigation, an intensive inquiry. So that is a case study method. That is case study. In the case of survey, so that is a broad-based investigation. Survey means a broad-based, the entire, the population may be, a universe may be entire. That in the survey method we have, that is a broad-based investigation. So that is in the investigation point of view, one is, so in the case study, we have an intensive investigation. There is every possibility for the researcher to have an intensive investigation, but survey is a broad-based investigation. That is the one such difference in the case of investigation. In the case of study covers. So in the case of case study covers single unit or group in the case of case study. But in the case of survey, the survey covers a large number of units. So there is a spectrum, the range that is it covers it covers only one unit or group it can be considered in the case of case study. In the case of survey, so it covers a large number of units. So that is the scope is very wide in the case of survey. It covers more number of units. Therefore, that is survey. In the case of findings, so in the case of, this is very important. So the researchers, the newly entered doing the research scholars, they must have to understand that the findings cannot be generalized. So that is most important. So many of the studies we are observing that so the observations may be generalized, so, but it is not good on the part of the researcher, and that the findings cannot be generalized. So in the case of case study, it is not possible for the researcher to generalize the findings in the case of case study. But while in the case of survey, so that is the findings of study can be generalized, because so we have taken larger number of units that represents the maybe universe or the entire group. So therefore, in the survey, there is a larger number of units. So the findings can be generalized. But in the case of study, in the case of case study, findings cannot be generalized, because it is an intensive investigation, and though it is an intensive and in-depth investigation, and the breadth is very limited, that we cannot, scope is very limited, the findings cannot be generalized. So the case of case study, but the findings can be generalized in the case of survey method. And the another one is testing hypothesis, which is most important for the researcher. That is there is the case study, the testing hypothesis about structural and procedural characteristics are there. We can take status relation, interpersonal behavior or managerial style, or some specific units, or as an organization or small group or community. In this case, we can, according to that, the hypothesis can be tested. But in the case of survey, it is useful for testing hypothesis about large social aggregates. So it is here it's very limited, scope is very limited in the survey. So there is a hypothesis about large social aggregates. So that so hypothesis is the gesture, and that can be tested in larger aggregates in the case of survey method. So these are some of the differences, and in the case of case study method and the survey method. So we can look into these points to make the difference in between case study and survey. One is investigation, and what case study covers and what survey method covers, and how findings are whether they are generalized or not generalized. In the case of case study, they are generalized, not generalized. Survey, they can be generalized. Testing hypothesis is very limited in the case of case study, but it can be applied for larger aggregates in the case of survey method. These are the 4 points to make the distinction between case study and survey method. So then we have design of a case study. Uh, so here, to obtain a complete picture of the participants as a possible, a case study researchers can employ a variety of case study designs. So there are two types. We can take two types of that is design of case study. One is single case design. Another one is multiple case design. So this means a single case design means events are limited to single occurrence. So that is a single case design. So here the design is inability to provide generalizing conclusion. So when you have taken single case design, so it is not possible for the researcher to generalize the conclusion or to generalize the observations and findings in a particular when the events are there. So that is in a single case design. But in the case of multiple case design, it can adapted for the with real life events that show numerous sources for evidence to replication and rather than sampling logic that is possible in the case of multiple case design. There are two types of design of case study. One is single case design, and what is single case design and what is multiple case design. So therefore, there is inability to generalize in the case of single case design, and in the case of multiple case design, there is some possibility. There is some replication law than sampling logic in the case of multiple case design. So there are certain steps for case study. So these steps, so we must know the steps for case study means what are the various phases for case study, what are the various what is the process for case study or phases for case study, and there are different phases or steps for case study. So number one is that is determining the present status of the case or cases. So that is so the first step to determine the present status or of the case or cases through direct observation. So here direct observation is required. So through direct observation, we can in addition to direct observation, the physical examination of the case or cases or psychological evaluation that can also be taken care of. And so in this first step, direct observation, so researcher can follow this step. What is the present status of a case or cases? Number two, that is identifying the most probable antecedents of the case or cases. So identifying most probable antecedents of the case or cases means, so the researcher has to identify, so what are the most probable and that means the antecedents means the previously logic that exists before. So what is the logic that exists before that can be identified for this particular case, and that is so that means in case of sure learner. So suppose you take for example, there is a one student, one child is there. There is a sure learner is there. Slow learner is there. So what is the reasons for the for his slow learning? So even all inputs are being provided to him. So what are the reasons for the slow learning? That must be identified. So that is one another step. So I'm telling only small hypothetical example. So this is what are the reasons for these can be attributed to our research problems also. So what are the reasons for a particular problem or working finance problem or the other financial problems in a particular organization or institution, that logic that can be identified existing before that is identifying the most probable antecedents of the case or cases. In the case that another one is other third step is verification of antecedents. So once the researcher has identified the logics of that particular case. So what are the reasons and what are the basis for that particular situation, and what are the consequences for that particular situation once he has identified, and then he has to verify that antecedents whether they are true or not, or by true or hypothesis. That is the third step. That means this method involves a multi-method approach, which includes multi-method approach can be applied. In the case of third step, that is which includes observation, that is past history of the case, interview, etc. So these methods can be applied for verification. So that is most important. So without these methods, we cannot verify the antecedents of these hypotheses. Earlier, what just now have mentioned. So a child is a slow learning child. So what are that can be identified that different methods, multi methods can be applied. That is multi-method approach, which includes observation can be made, and past history can be undertaken. So one should have an observation and a past history of the case, and we can make the interview. So these type of methods can be applied in the case of third step. So that is verification of antecedents and hypothesis. And the fourth step is diagnosis and remedial measures. Once we have verified and found and tested the hypothesis and found the results, and then the diagnosis can be done, and remedial measures can be undertaken. Remedial measures can be taken care can be done, and after verification of that antecedents or hypothesis, the next step is remedial measures. So that means whether it is directed towards diagnosis of the causes, and suggesting remedial measures in the light of causes. So after results, remedial measures can be suggested. So this small example can be applied for our entire social, the commerce and management topics of case study also. So that the remedial measures, so that is another step in the case study. This is fourth step. And fifth step for case study is the last step for the case study is follow up. That is the follow up of the case or cases. That is study the impact of remedy. Then we have to follow the measures, and follow up measures can be done once in our social. Once we have offered the suggestions. So suppose we have one case study, that we have completed that case study, and we have made certain recommendations, and packet of suggestions are offered, and gateways are offered, and whether these measures are useful for improving the betterment of a particular organization, that can be taken care of. So that can be seen. So that is follow up of the case or cases. So whether it is happening or not, so that is a different issue, but that can be done once a researcher has offered the recommendations and the suggestions, and that recommendation suggestions must be implemented for the betterment of that particular case, particular organization, for particular institution on which the researcher has made his contribution. That is a follow-up of the case or cases. Certainly, when the recommendations are practical and pragmatic, and definitely the practical and pragmatic the suggestions could definitely and certainly improve the organizational performance, the financial performance, whatever may be on which the case study has been undertaken, the performance can be improved, and for the performance of a particular organization in terms of on which the case has been made can be definitely improved. So these are the various steps for case study that is starting with present status and antecedent, verification of antecedents and diagnosis and remedial measures, and finally the follow-up of the case. Once the measures are offered and when they are implemented, and what are the next situation that can be follow-up of the case after implementation of the recommendations or measures. What is the situation of a particular case, that is follow-up of the case. These are the various steps for case study. So therefore, then finally, the next one is sources of case study. So there are different sources are there. One is the personal documents are there. So that is perhaps in the case of people, if you take the case study, that is most of the people, they have the diaries and autographies and memories when we have made a personal investigation on cases, and other events also. Institutions have some the documents are there and data is there, and these are the different sources. The personal documents or life history. In our cases, we have different sources for gathering the data. That is in the case of the case studies. So the next one is, so what are the advantages of case study, and then what are the so for any, there are two sides for anything. There are two sides of the coin. There is a flip side of the coin. One side of the coin is advantage, and flip side of the coin is the disadvantage. And we see one side is that advantages of the case study is nature and universe. So that means case study method proved beneficial in determining the nature of units to be studied along the nature and universe. So it is beneficial in determining, we can observe the nature and universe. It is one such advantage in the case of case study method, and flexible with respect to that is data collection methods, and all method collection are useful case. So in data collection methods are also, there is a flexibility. There is no rigidity at all. There are certain flexibility. Researcher has certain flexibilities in collecting the data. Any qualitative analysis, sometimes quantitative analysis can also be applied in the case of case study, but more particularly qualitative data can be gathered, and what data is required for his case. So there is for the researcher has an advantage of flexibility in collecting the data. That is flexibility is there in the data collection methods. That is another advantage. Third advantage is it can extend virtually to any dimensions of the topic studied. So any dimension virtually we can extend the situation, and to any particular situation of a topic, and all aspects may be studied or specific aspects may be emphasized. If you take a particular case study, all aspects may be studied, or you can restrict to particular situations, and it can be extend. There is a possibility to extend to any dimension. That is another advantage of case study. And number 4, another one is any kind of social settings. So it can be conducted. So particularly any kind of social settings. It can be so it can particularly any kind of social settings. So that is also advantage of case study. And another one is specific instances of tests of theories. So case studies offer, so that is specific instances of tests of theories that can also be taken in the case study method. So that is another advantage of case study. And another one is highly fruitful approach. So for the purpose of group or process analysis as against the analysis of individual traits alone, so it is a highly fruitful approach. And why it is a highly fruitful approach means there is a very in-depth and comprehensive analysis can be taken by the researcher. There is a very possibility for the researcher therefore the end results are very fruitful and they are very immensely useful. Therefore, it is a highly fruitful approach. And the wider range. Suppose in the case of human beings, social events, or certain cases, there is a wide range to take analysis in the in-depth insights into human life. Or even in the organizations also, when it is one case, we can see any insights into a particular case. All insights can be observed and they can be analyzed and interpreted. If one case is taken, that is there is a possibility for the researcher. So therefore, within the case, there is a wider range. Insights can be more to be investigated. So more insights can be investigated, and there is a possibility for the investigator to have a wider range of analysis in the case of case study. And the last one is the researcher. That means it enhances the experience of the researcher. So that means it increases his analyzing ability and skill. Because when he has gone for when the researcher does his research on a particular case, and there is an intensive analysis and in-depth analysis and so very close scrutiny close examination of a particular investigation, and automatically he can acquire more research skills, more analyzing ability skills. His ability skills will be improved, and other research skills will be improved in his research process, and that is also another advantage of case study. Enhances the experience of the researchers, and he can get the ability in analyzing the research in depth, and he acquires more skills in testing the hypothesis and other applying the other advanced statistical techniques also in the case study method. And disadvantages of case study. So therefore, these are some of the disadvantages. We cannot generalize. Already when we were making the distinction between the case study method and survey method, it was it has been mentioned that so generalizability is very limited in the case study method. Findings cannot be generalized in the case study method. So that is one such disadvantage. And another one is so time consuming. So there is when compared to the other methods, survey methods, other methods, it is more time consuming in the sense, no doubt that the case study is one case, even though the case study scope is limited, but even though it takes one case, but it consumes because he has to go for an in-depth analysis. So that's why some time and very qualitative techniques he has to apply, and the time, it is time consuming. And another disadvantage is inadequate for analysis of macro problems, and it can be for more macro problems cannot be undertaken in the case study method, and this is also another disadvantage. Another one is last one is danger of investigators overconfidence is more in the case of case study. But he assumes that the case study is only one single case, and he has overconfidence. Researcher has overconfidence that he can do it, complete it at the earliest. That may be his assumption, that it creates overconfidence among the researchers who have chosen the case study methods. That is not correct. That is a danger. Overconfidence is always danger. So that is also another disadvantage of a case study method. So therefore, it leads to various basics such as the errors. That means when overconfidence is there, there is errors for perception, judgment, and overemphasis of unusual events, unwarranted extrapolation, and ad hoc theorizing and sweeping. He will give a sweeping generalizations. When there is overconfidence, his perception may be different, judgment may be different. He has overemphasis on unusual factors, events and factors, and unwanted extrapolation, and ad hoc theorizing, and finally and he can offer sweeping generalizations. Then he has overconfidence. These are the dangers of overconfidence. Therefore, I suggest the researchers and who are pursuing at present and those who have chosen case study method don't have overconfidence that have many that overconfidence creates many problems to the researchers. So avoid overconfidence in doing those who are doing research on case study method. So these are the some of the disadvantages of case study method.
Professor, can I have a break, Professor?
We can the last slide, sir. We can complete.
Okay.
So we can conclude the overall discussion that is so the in-depth exploration and the systematic step by step we can have, and the case study in the business to conduct the step in the business discipline also, and also all operational qualitative aspects can also be taken in the case study and final dissertation under the targeted step-by-step plan with real-time approach, examples to conduct. So there must be a real-time approach. Examples can be taken to conduct a case study is given. So these are the this is the conclusion with regard to case study. And so thank you very much for your patient listening. So these are the various dimensions of case study.
Can we have a break for 10 minutes, Professor? Professor, 10 minutes break, Professor.
Less.
Okay, Professor. Professor, we can proceed, Professor. Professor, we can proceed, Professor. Proceed, Professor. Professor?
Sir, shall we commence?
Please, sir. Please, sir. Please.
Okay, sir. So, in the second session, the financial performance of Indian Farmers Fertilizers Cooperative Limited, a case study. This is so one of the PhD students under my under my guidance and supervision has completed, and she has been awarded this on this topic. That so once this is taken as one example of for case study. Um, yes. So this I have given this backdrop of the case study. So so we have to give a prelude or backdrop with that particular topic. So that is financial. So because we are doing, she has done research on the that is financial performance. That is so what is finance? So that is finance is a scarce resource, and therefore it has to be managed effectively and successfully. Then functioning of the any enterprise. So the inefficient financial management or imprudent financial management practices could result in failure of any business organization. So therefore, irrespective of any that is structure, ownership, and size, the financial organization of the enterprise capable of ensuring that the various finance functions, planning and control are to be carried the highest degree of efficiency. Efficiency must be there, then only the organization will be would be successful organization. The profitability and stability of the business depend upon the manner in which finance function are performed and related with other business functions. So the finance functions, as you know well, that there are three important finance functions, so that investment function and investmentation or function and financing decision, and the third one is dividend decision. These are all important decisions. The entire gamut of financial management encompasses or emphasizes with three important functions or decisions, and they are interlinked and interrelated. All these functions are interlinked or interrelated. So therefore, the functions are performed and related with other business functions. So the business finance has laid more stress on comparing the financial results of public and private sector and vis-a-vis profitability. The factors in financial markets, social, economic, political, these are some of the considerations which influence internal decisions. And so therefore, so in any research, whether it is a case study research or survey research, whatever method, so the problem must be identified. That is what is known as a statement of the problem. So here this is Farmers Fertilizers Cooperative Limited. Therefore, so we have given the problem. We have identified the problem that the one of the vital parts in agricultural production and the so one the very important in this sector is very important. It plays a vital role in the Indian economy. It been playing an important role in achieving self-sufficiency in food grains. So this is the significance of that particular industry, that they are succeeding meeting the demand of full fertilizers primary products. So it is one of the largest food producers. The production and the chemicals, they have witnessed an increase for meeting the increased demand. So the sales play a major part in the profitability. Ultimate result, bottom line of any organization is dependent on the sales activity. So therefore, owing to this pricing policy of government, there are fluctuations in their sales also. So this therefore, when sales are affected, automatically the profitability will be affected. Financial position of the farm and some affect some production, while other market changes in capital stock size, market share, and growth of the farm. And when the problem is identified, the further step in the process is research process is that is need for the study. And what is the need for the study is explained. That is the financial performance of IFCO, which is the largest company limited, corporate limited. So because the only few research studies were carried out, so that we have to. So this would be identified from the review of literature. When you have made the review of literature, so then and we can identify that only few research studies were carried out on the individual units of IFCO, and more particularly on production marketing problems. So the present study, therefore, the present study assumes significance and contributes to the literature on the field of. So when only few studies were undertaken, so this gives more literature and contribution to the existing literature, and it is an integral part of the job of the financial managers involved in planning, allocating resources of control. And finally, the findings of the present study and the need we are emphasizing what is the need for the study means in the last but one step, the findings of the present study. So they will be great help to financial managers involving their financial problems scientifically rather than randomly, and also in formulating policies and procedures in future. So this study provides when we have identified the problems. scientific and scientific approach. That is a research. The scientific investigation, scientific inquiry can be done, and the problems are identified particularly. That is possible only in the case study method. So the problems can be solved and they can be identified particularly, not randomly. So that is the advantage of case study, and also in formulating policies and procedures. And when researcher has identified particular problems, and the policies and procedures can also be easily formulated. So that is the, that would be possible in the more possible in the case of case study method, and it is more informative and useful to the researchers and scholars in different areas of financial management. So this is another need for the study. And and next step is also the researcher has to formulate specific objectives of the study. So the researcher has set the specific object to the study, or so in the when the topic is on the financial performance. So there are important aspects. So here in the study, so the peculiarity uniqueness of the study is also is the market value added approach is considered, and other one is Altman Z-score values are calculated, and they are tested, and so that is the major contribution of the study. So therefore, first objective is the one is the examining the financial structure of IFCO, and the performance of fixed assets. So that is investment decision. First one is related to financing decision. The performance of working capital, that is also the investment. Working capital is one part of the investment decision, and finally the profitability. So related to also dividend decision. And finally, so there is some deviation to the earlier studies. In this particular study, what is done, another objective is set, that objective is analyzing the overall performance through market value added approach. And so the market value added approach means that is the market value of the firm minus we can take the book value of the firm. And other one is there is also the market value. The formula is there that the summation of t is equals to 1 economic value added, that is divided by 1 plus c power to the t. So this is the actual formula for the calculation of the market value added, and the economic value added is net operating profit after tax minus weighted average cost of capital into capital invested. So we will get this economic value added. So economic value added also needed to calculate the market value added, and Altman Z-score means that there are 5 important indicators, 5 important ratios. That is working capital divided by total assets, retained earnings divided by total assets, and EBIT, that means earnings before interest divided by total assets, market value of equity divided by total liability, and finally sales divided by total assets. So these 5 ratios are calculated and weightages are given, and so this is with regard to last, that is Altman Z-score. So there is a criteria is there. So better performance, poor performance. Based on that, we can evaluate. Based on the score, we can fix the whether it belongs to which performance. The company belongs to which performance. These are the objectives that were formulated, and so naturally the hypothesis must be formulated in tune with the objectives. Accordingly, the hypotheses were formulated, and the first hypothesis is there is no significant difference in the solvency performance of IFCO during the study period. And another one is there is no significant difference in the liquidity performance, and there is no significant difference in the operational efficiency. So the operational efficiency turnover ratios that relates to operational efficiency, and there is no significant difference in the profitability performance. All these, so these are all related to objectives of the study, which are set for the study. That is, so this null hypothesis have been formulated, and so the null hypothesis, these statements are relevant in a particular context. Therefore, So the researcher has formulated null hypothesis instead of alternative hypothesis. Then when it is rejected, then automatically that becomes alternative hypothesis. We can formulate alternative hypothesis. Then methodology. So in the methodology part, so that means case study method has been adapted to inquire into the financial performance of Indian fertilizer. So this is method, case study method, because one case has been one organization, one limited cooperative limited institution has been undertaken for the in-depth analysis. That case study method has been, therefore, case study method has been adopted. Another one is therefore, as already in the first earlier session, we discussed about the importance and significance of case study, and it is a careful and exhaustive observation of an organization and in-depth, and it gives methodological rigor, validity, and reliability. And the data which is relevant for the study has been gathered and analyzed and interpreted. So this is the methodology that is one with regard to case study, and then followed by period of the study. So the 10-year period, that is 2009-10 to 2018-19 time series analysis has been adopted. So for this type of studies, financial performance studies, so naturally 10 years period maybe would be given better results, or at least 8 years when this we have adopted time series analysis. And then one is database. Here also, because we are it is a case study method, so the primary data has been collected by administering a questionnaire, and both secondary data, annual reports and records, and financial performance that so the all four relevant to calculate four relevant ratios. So the statements, the profit and loss account, and they have recasted, and the balance sheets have been prepared, and then from them the various ratios have been calculated, and then the other source is also there. We have given the newspapers, internet, journals, magazines, etc. These are and the various reports issued by the government of India, and annual reviews. And the scope and limitations of the study. So naturally, so only it is confined to the financial performance, and management, other organizational aspects are excluded. So it may not be possible for the researcher to do all the management, other organizations. It's not come under the purview of financial performance. Therefore, they are excluded and may not be generalized. So that is important. So it was already it has been already mentioned in the earlier session that the findings could not be generalized. So the inferences drawn may not be generalized. That is one such limitation. The one such disadvantage also we already added seen in the slide also. The annual rounded to decimals, and the secondary data have been collected more than one source. There may be slight differences between one source to it is going to happen, naturally happens. And finally, so these are all also they feel that minor lapses. So these lapses do in no way act as a deterrence in drawing effective and meaningful inferences. And when the scope is confined and limitations are mentioned, and these limitations in no way act as a deterrent in drawing effective and meaningful inferences. So this is scope and limitations of the study. The researcher must be careful while mentioning the scope of the study when we have taken case study, and limitations of the study of a particular case. And then tools of analysis. These are the various tools are applied. One is standard deviation, coefficient of variation, compounded growth rate, t-test, regression analysis, and ANOVA, ratio analysis, market value added approach, Altman Z score. Already I have mentioned just now that what is market value added approach, how it is arrived at, and how Altman Z score is what are the various 5 ratios to calculate the Altman Z score. This is the chapter layout, and in the first introduction, the research methodology, profile of IFCO, financial. So this chapter method, chapter scheme, or chapterization, chapter layout also. So more or less, it must be synchronized with objectives. If you see the objectives that are set by the researcher, financial structure performance. So that is one objective. Fixed assets performance is one objective, and working capital and profitability performance is another objective, and financial performance through market value added approach and alternate judge score is the last objective of the study. So therefore, the chapter scheme, chapter layout is also synchronized or coincided with the objective set. And then finally, this is a consequent or end result objective, that is end result, that is a chapter, that is a summary of findings and suggestions. So, so due to depth of time and time, the paucity of time, so only certain ratios have been particular ratios were taken are presented in this slide. It's not possible to present all the ratios that were calculated, and therefore only a summary table with regard to various ratios calculated or presented from 2009 to 10 and ending with 2018 to 19. And various ratios were calculated, and so the D by E debt equity ratio, that is total debt by equity, and interest coverage ratio, like that, the different ratios, that is debtors turnover ratio, interest on the inventory turnover ratio, capital the assets turnover ratio, fixed current assets turnover ratio, fixed assets turnover ratio, and total asset turnover ratio, current ratio, quick ratio, that all ratios. That means we can have a classification of ratios. That is, as you all know, that leverage ratios, liquidity ratios, and turnover ratios or efficiency ratios, and finally profitability ratios. So all from all these four categories of ratios, all these ratios are taken, and in addition to that, alternate debt score ratios are also considered to arrive the results based on the objectives set. And these ratios were tested in the earlier scheme. I have shown the various statistical tools that were applied, and the various ratios were tested with this. Were applied the mean and standard deviation, coefficient of variation, t-test, that is for hypothesis testing, and finally compound growth rate. So here findings based on that. We can have findings. So the findings of the study were given. So first, the data has been gathered. Gathered data been the tables were prepared, and they are analyzed and interpreted. And then only first we have to analyze. Then we have researcher has to interpret. So sometimes researcher what they do, some of the scholars what they know, they first they interpret then analyze. That is not correct. So first we have to analyze the data, and we have to interpret. Based on the interpretations, we have to derive the observations and findings. Based on the findings, suggestions or conclusions can also be drawn, and then suggestions can be offered. So here accordingly the researcher has done. That data has been gathered, and tables were prepared and analyzed and interpreted, and observations are made, and then conclusions, and then the findings are made. So for each chapter, some findings were given. So the first objective also the financial structure performance. So that here analysis that the total long-term funds of IFCO on average continued 50.1%. It had varied from the lowest of 52.3% to highest 1%. The major contribution was recorded from the net worth, whereas the long-term borrowings decreased from 55 the present year. The total short-term funds were recorded on an average. The extent of net worth was more than. So here, based on that, we have identified that the extent of net worth was more than the long-term borrowed funds. So therefore, IFCO preferred to rely more upon net worth to finance their expansion and growth activities. This is the observation, the finding. So it preferred more that is to rely more upon net worth to finance their expansion and growth activities. And then based on the debt equity ratio, there is a finding. So debt equity ratio, so that is the analysis there. The standard ratio is 2:1, and it indicates that the debt was employed judiciously and only during the beginning 2 years to reap the benefits of financial leverage. And you know that based on the analysis and interpretation, that was employed judiciously. That means the standard ratio is 2:1. In the beginning 2 years only it was done. Therefore, to reap the financial leverage. So debt actually. So why debt is employed means debt capital is cheaper source than equity capital. That is, though risk is there, financial risk is there, and financial leverage benefits are there. There are benefits of financial leverage, and there are tax savings from the interest charges. So, and dividends do not have tax savings from interest charges, but when the company, there are two types of companies: levered companies and unlevered companies. And in the case of unlevered companies, those who have employed only equity capital, they do not enjoy the benefits of financial leverage. But the levered companies, those who have employed both the capital, that debt capital and equity capital, so they can enjoy the benefits of financial leverage. But to the extent that is the standard norm is there. So 2:1. So that is one such finding. And another one is IFCO had not employed long-term borrowed funds at desired level. That's why. So therefore, that is that what just now I have explained. That is, it is against the canons of financial management practices. So it is against means it is canons means it is against the principles. Canons means principles of financial management practices. That there must be judicious mix of both debt and equity. If only the long-term funds when long-term funds were not employed desired level, it loses its the organization loses its benefits from financial leverage. So therefore, that is one such observation. It had not evinced much interest to use outsider funds than shareholders' equity. So the shareholders' equity, that is net worth, it is not outsider funds. It has evinced much interest on shareholders' equity than outsider funds. And another observation is, IFCO had never tried to raise long-term debt after 2010 onwards. It had an unfavorable leverage, and so that the capital structure of IFCO was imbalanced. So capital structure of that means which represents on the left-hand side of the balance sheet when it was a T shape of balance sheet. Now vertical type of balance sheets in the Act of 2013. And therefore, so the difference is capital structure represents the entire total side of the liability side. Capital structure, it excludes some short-term debt, and therefore here it had an unfavorable leverage of capital structure. So when there is an unfavorable leverage, the capital structure was imbalanced or lopsided. At least, so there is must be an optimum capital structure. So that is one of the principles of the financial management. Principles of financial one of the principles of financial management. But here the capital structure was imbalanced. So that is not advisable. The capital structure must be balanced or optimum capital structure is preferable, and then a lopsided or imbalanced capital structure is not advised. So that is another finding. Then, so the total debt to total funds ratio is also given. over the period of time, and the ratio was also less than unity during years. Less than unity means less than 1. That is there to 2009-10 period. IFCO had relied upon external funds than internal funds for expansion activities, and it did not depend too much on external debt. So it strengthened its internal funds from 2016-17 onwards, so that it would not create excessive interest burden. To certain extent, it is advisable that therefore mixed trend could be noticed in the case of total debt and total funds. And the interest coverage ratio had fluctuated in between 1.7 and 2.3 over a period of time. On an average, it is 1.9 times, and the EBIT had exceeded the interest charges, and IFCO was able to repay the fixed financial interest burden, as evident from the ratio, which was the interest coverage ratio was comfortable, and therefore it was able to repay the fixed interest burden. So another operational leverage had also been was also calculated, and it was negative in the beginning, and the highest was 1.38 times. The was optimum in almost all the years in the beginning year to in the last, that is when it was negative in 2017-18, and in remaining years it was optimum. The contribution was negative to the fact that variable cost had exceeded the sales figure. So we all know how to calculate the operating leverage. Therefore, the contribution was negative. That's why it was not favorable, and in that year. So then, leverage levels, fixed assets are optimally utilized. When it is the result of optimal leverage is that the fixed assets were optimally utilized to turn out the sales. In other words, the contribution was incommensurate with the level of EBIT. So that is another observation is made with regard to the operating leverage. The operating leverage actually refers to operating risk, and that is reasonable margin of safety ratio is there. Decrease in sales would not bring down the earnings at a higher rate. So this is also another way of another way that we can the way of made a finding that with regard to operating leverage. And then financial leverage had declined from 2.41.2 the 1.7 times in 2014-15. So audible, sir? Sir, audible and visible?
Sir, audible, sir?
Visible, okay. And
Audible,
therefore,
sir.
And so therefore it improved from that is 3.08 times in 2018-19. So the financial leverage indicates the debt was judiciously borrowed, barring few years, more particularly during the last years of study period. So that is another observation. When debt was judiciously borrowed and employed, automatically there are benefits of financial leverage. Otherwise, the organization could lose it could not reap the benefits of financial leverage. So the financial leverage acted favorable in majority years of the study period. It signifies that it used to magnify the earnings of the shareholders. So when financial leverage was favorable, so that could help the organization to magnify the earnings of the shareholders. So that is the ultimate objective of the financial management. So wealth maximization. So that is an important aspect. So first there is a profit maximization, then shifted to the wealth maximization. And now there is also some shift is there, that is corporate social responsibility is also one of the objectives of the organizations. Then, so that is the objective that means the wealth maximization is important. So that is there that finding is there when earnings are magnified, earnings of the shareholders are magnified. So because shareholders are the real owners of the organization, that wealth must be maximized. The another one is, so when operating leverage is calculated and then financial leverage is calculated, then operating leverage is multiplied with financial leverage. We could get the combined leverage, and the results are also given that fixed assets utilization and capital employed provide a favorable result. We can observe a favorable result from the that particular combined leverage ratio because fixed assets were utilized effectively. And another one is the organization, the cooperative limited, the IFCO, was able to, that the total risk is at controllable level in many years of the risk. That means operating risk, the operating leverage refers to operating risk, financial leverage refers to financial risk, and when it is combined, when it is that is operating risk is multiplied with this financial risk, and we will get total risk that is at controllable level in many years of the study period. And then you can the percentage of long-term funds to total funds that stripped out to fixed assets as a percentage to total. That is also another finding. Then the long-term funds are used to finance a part of current assets requirement also. That means core current assets were financed hardcore working capital. Core current assets or hardcore working capital could be financed with a part of the long-term funds. So yeah, that is also actually alternative definition given by L.J. Geithman. So the net working capital should be financed with long-term funds. So that is the alternative definition of the net working capital defined by L.J. Geithman. So that is the part of current assets our requirement were financed with the long-term funds. The current assets as a percentage that is also exceeded to total assets in majority of years. So the majority of current assets were financed with the short-term funds, so this is perhaps an aggressive approach. And this is another. Also, I have told that core current assets. Core current assets that is mentioned, that is hardcore working capital. Some funds were left for hardcore working capital, long-term funds. And that is with regard to first objective, the findings were made, and second one is fixed assets performance. So the fixed assets performance, we can observe that fixed assets, investment in fixed assets was less than the investment in current. That is when you have seen the structure of the total structure, that we could observe the investment in fixed assets was less in investment in current assets, because the peculiarity of this particular industry, it could happen that is the investment in current assets was more, and then long-term loan and advances had registered a gradual decline, and this is another finding. Intangible assets were recorded negligibly. So naturally, in many of the organizations, this asset be recorded registered very negligible level. And another one is the declining depicting trend, and percentage of fixed assets have never exceeded the percentage of current assets. That means the current assets depicted they had witnessed a higher slide when compared to the fixed assets. And then gross block, the analysis also given. And the finding is gross block had an impact on the net fixed assets. So the important ratio in the fixed assets performance is that one is fixed assets to net worth ratio. So it depicted a decline over the period, and there are also some fluctuations and variations. And another average ratio was also given. So it indicates that net worth was not sufficient to finance the fixed assets requirement. So based on the ratio, so this is a finding. This is an observation that net worth was not sufficient. So we have to derive this this type of findings from the analysis that net worth was not sufficient to finance the fixed assets requirement. Therefore, if we had relied upon borrowed funds, this was also already observed and did face poor solvency performance. So The net worth was very less than it did face poor solvency. Poor solvency. So that another finding is that long-term funds had reported fluctuations in quantitative. The quantitative term means in magnitude, in total figures or magnitude. In terms of magnitude, they had reported the fluctuations. We can observe from that decreasing and increasing levels, and further there is an improvement. And the other ratio is fixed to long-term funds had also exceeded. So the observation is, or inference is, it indicates the insufficiency of long-term funds in financing the fixed assets. Financing by short-term funds due to shortage of long-term funds. So that is another. So actually, fixed assets requirement should be financed with long-term funds, because fixed assets were for a longer period of time. If fixed assets were funded or financed by short-term funds, the organization, the financial manager has to renew the funds again and again. That is the problem. So therefore, here, because the shortage of long-term funds, the short-term funds were used for the financing the fixed assets. So the average fixed assets turnover ratio, it shows the efficiency of the fixed assets, and there is an increasing trend during the years, and it's shown an increasing. It indicates the efficiency in the forms of the work performance. So that efficiency, we can observe the when ratio is has improved, then ultimately the result is the efficiency in the forms of work performance. And but there is a standard is there. Standard for every ratio, there are standards are set and fixed. The standard norm for this is 5 times, and it was not when it has not reached to the standard level and desired norm, and therefore it was not up to the desired level in generating the sales revenue. So that is another observation from this ratio. So the phase of increase in sales had exceeded so what is the finding from that analysis is it reflects the expansion in gross black had a positive impact on sales. So that is an indication. So when pace of increase when we have calculated the trends, so the in between sales and gross black, the pace of increase in the pace means the rate of increase in sales had exceeded that of gross black. So that is an indication that reflects the expansion in gross black had a positive impact on sales. So that automatically, when sales are improved, that improves the levels of profit. Another one is expansion in gross black and sales are not in positive in a low and fluctuating margin. It is evident that fixed assets were not treated properly. In the beginning, also this observation was made worse also. And IFCO is one of the large sector manufacturing companies under cooperative sector, and it will evaluate the depreciation value and some standard using some standard techniques or methods. Annuity method of computing, it uses the annuity method of computing the depreciation. And the annuity method gives the exact value of the asset only at the end of the year. So therefore, the opening balance. So this is the explanation of that annuity method, and based on that, so observation is made, and then it also follows the primary data. Based on the primary data, this observation is given, and consistent depreciation policy is also given. Later depreciation policy was inconsistent, so depreciation to sales ratio had varied. And there are also variations in between 2% and 6% during the study period. There are also fluctuations. So the consistent depreciation policy is there up to 2013, and it remained as a replica to depreciation to gross black. And that means it is just same as in the case of other ratio which you have seen. So consistent in the first 5 years of study when compared to later 5 years of study. This is also another observation with regard to depreciation. The status of IFCO was satisfactory in respect of provision for depreciation. This is another observation. So, in the investment decision, this is another part that is working capital and the impact of working capital on profitable performance. And we have combined both working capital and profitability here, and we have made another objective that is overall performance measured with reference to market value added, and other one is Z score, alternate Edwin Z score, alternate Z score value. Then here the structure of working capital is prepared. Based on the structure, the net working capital was positive in 7 out of 10 years. As you know all well, there are two concepts of working capital: gross working capital and net working capital. Total investment in current assets constitutes the gross working capital. When the excess of current assets over current liabilities represents net working capital, that was positive in 7 out of 10 years. So the other component is other current assets. The analysis is made because then miscellaneous current assets and the level of investment in inventories. So in working capital, the important components are: one is inventory, then bills receivables or debtors, and cash management. So in the case of investment in inventories, decreased over a period of time. So the components of current assets are fluctuated over the years under reference. So various components of current assets are fluctuated, and short-term borrowings are also liabilities. That analysis also is given. Trade payable was next item into short-term borrowings, and it is a negligible percentage is registered. And it may be expounded that means it may be concluded that short-term borrowings and trade payables are major components of current liabilities. When compared, when we have seen the structure, this type of observation could be made. Then indices were calculated. Based on the indices, the trends were calculated, indexes were calculated. Then and compared with the current liabilities and current assets indices, and that implies the working capital was deficient. And so based on the indices also, we found that the working capital was deficient. It was observed that working capital was deficient during some years, and working capital condition was satisfactory in 7 out of 10. Based on the above analysis, it was observed that working capital condition was satisfactory. IFCO had enjoyed positive net working capital condition in majority years of the study. That means when there is no deficit of working capital, so it enjoyed a positive net working capital in majority years of the study. It has already, this next point has already been mentioned, that the positive net working capital would be financed with long-term funds. And so this was actually coined by the definition, alternative definition for net working capital as advocated by L.J. Geithner. So that is inventory. Next levels analysis is given, how they are declining, and the increase in inventory was not in tune with the rise in current assets. When you compare the inventory component with the total current assets, the level of investment had reduced in terms of percentages. On quantitative terms, they tried to meet the increased production levels to meet the customers' demand. That is also another observation. In the structural bills payable are also given, that is how it is by purchasing pattern and cash and credit basis. And these are all primary details. And the next one is ratio, this inventory turnover ratio, that indicates the efficiency of inventory. Was not far away from the standard norm during the entire period of time, and that means it is very close to the close proximity to the standard norm. So that is standard norm of 8 times. And it indicates that inventory turnover to sales optimally throughout, though not effectively, since ratio 7.01 times was close to the close. That's what just now I have mentioned, close proximity to standard norm of 8 times. So the indices of trade receivables, how they are reflected, that is analyzed, and then how the rate of increase in trade receivables is also indicated, and the percentages with current assets is compared and analyzed, and ratio how it is reflected. An increase in the size of trade receivables was due to why sales, the trade receivables increased due to expanded sales or the period under reference. That is the reason, that is the conclusion made, the increase in size of trade receivables. And there were also fluctuations because why this fluctuation means irregular behavior of cash collections from trade receivables, and it implies cash collection from this was not undertaken effectively by the management of IFCO. This is one such major observation made from the bills receivables. And then the IFCO provides the products to consumers through different market line, market through different means like market, sedge, distribution, and dealers. And they sell the products on the basis of cash and credit. And the collection period also 1 to 2 months. And the company sells the products on the basis of market value. And receivables turnover ratio is also, it is low and steeply declined, and then average ratio is also given. Debts were not that. What are the observations? What were the observations from this analysis? Means debts were not collected effectively in majority of the years. So that is the major observation made from the analysis. Working funds were when debts were not collected. So the implication is that working funds were unnecessarily blocked up in trade receivables. So that working funds, there is an opportunity cost for that when they were blocked up in trade receivables. Therefore, we would forgo the opportunity cost. That's what I mentioned, that so in investing more funds in trade receivables. Then management of IFCO, the sufficient working capital is there, and liquidity calculated and controlling inflows and cash flows, and liquidity performance is short-term loan and bills receivables. These components are taken raised through secured and unsecured funds. That is the how the funds were collected, short-term funds were collected. And then the percentage of cash and bank balance to current ratio, how they were fluctuated was mentioned. And then, so it is less than standard norm of 5 to 10%. So this is also given that standard norm is 5 to 10% cash balances. This was given by Gutman and Dougal. So this was advocated or endorsed by this Gutman and set by Gutman and Dougal. And the balances were not adequately maintained by when it was less than 5 to 10%. So it was a clear understanding that the balances were not adequately maintained by the management of IFCO. Balances in the sense cash and bank balances. They must be at least 5 to 10% of total assets, total current assets. This is so that is, in other words, it also quantum of cash and bank balances were wherein it was over and above as per the standard now. So actually, there are three important ratios are there to measure the liquidity performance. This is one of the objectives of our study also. The liquidity performance, the current ratio, as you know well, that standard norm is 2:1. It is there for many of the years it was well below the standard norm. The range also it is fluctuated some of the years. Based on that analysis, so observation was made that liquidity performance is poor in 9 out of 10 years. So that is a major observation. Out of 10 years, the liquidity performance was poor, and management was unable to meet currently maturing obligations. When liquidity performance was poor, so it could not be possible to meet the currently mature. That means currently maturing obligation means current liabilities. And then current ratio in working funds were unnecessarily blocked up only in 2010 in current assets. That position was alarming. On one hand, current ratio was not comfortable, and blocking of working funds was against the canons of finance. On the other hand, there are two indications and two reflections in this ratio. And kick ratio was also calculated, and then the that position was not based on that ratio also. The quick ratio means inventory you could excluded is excluded from the total current assets. That liquidity position was not good based on that also. That major chunk of current assets is in inventory or blocked up in inventories. And analysis is made, then the liquidity performance was poor during the entire period based on the net cash. This is actual liquidity. There are two types of liquidity. One is technical liquidity, another one is actual liquidity. Technical liquidity based on current ratio, quick ratio, absolute liquidity ratio, and the actual liquidity is based on net cash flows to current liabilities and actual that ratio was calculated based on actual liquidity position also. So the liquidity condition was precarious, and it had portrayed danger signals to the management. So both actual technical liquidity and both actual liquidity portrayed danger signals to the management. So that is another. The coverage of current liabilities also related to the actual liquidity position, and that is also was not up to the mark based on that. Even on that ratio also. So this is some of the observations. And next one is profitability ratios. Some of the profitability ratios were calculated, and then that is based on that also the gross profit ratio was good and impressive. That is a very welcoming sign. And the other one is operating ratio was almost higher during the period that were reduced operating profits. When operating ratio was higher, that reduces the operating profits. Lesser operating inefficiency had led to the lower operating profits in majority of the study. And the cost of goods and depreciation and operation ratios and the analysis is made, and then based on that also net profit ratio had edged down. Based on that ratio also, in the year the net profit ratio was less than the standard norm of 5 to 10% as opened by Paul SKR during 10 years period. So that is also less than 5 to 10% during the period. And it indicates the profit performance was not satisfactory. So when calculated ratios, when computed ratios were compared with the standards set by the financial experts or financial wizards, which are given in the literature on finance, then we could be able to derive the meaningful conclusion by comparing the ratios which are calculated and computed with the ratio with the standards set. So that's why these type of observations were made by comparing the computer calculated ratios with standards. Net profit margin was not favorable. That is also another observation. And this is based return on investment. This is the important ratio in profitability. This is also this return on investment is also called the DuPont formula, coined by American-based company. So there are different branches to calculate this return on investment. Totally, the net profit margin is multiplied with capital assets turnover or capital turnover. This is also steeply come down. And IFCO could not enjoy even minimum returns on its investment as ROI is less than. This is a very important observation. So naturally, manufacturing companies, they should have at least 12% on the return on investment. That is standard now. We could find in the literature on finance, and this was less. ROI was less than the standard norm of 12%. Therefore, minimum profits is not entered. It is discouraging to the prospective investors of. Therefore, it is a discouraging situation for the prospective investors. And if we had failed to enjoy reasonable returns in majority of the years, that is also, and it did not maximize the return to the share. That is, the ultimate objective could not be fulfilled. The situation is not good for the present and prospective shareholders. Was unproductivity of shareholder funds. When profits, they are not, wealth is not maximized. That is unproductivity of capital employed. So that is there is no productivity of capital employed, there is unproductivity of shareholder funds. That is one of the observations made. So this is the financial performance through market value approach and ultimate Z-score value. So that I have in the beginning also how the ratios were calculated and how this score was calculated, and these observations are made. And during the period there was a negative impact in 3 years out of 10 years, the inventory and all this with regard to gross working capital. And the other proprietary ratio and debt to total assets, current asset turnover ratio, these have a continuous decline over a period of time, and they reflects the reveals the investment in assets reflected on the profitability of the company. In the last, the low ratio and declining trend in ratio implies the current assets were not effectively turned out. These are the ratios were used, and the total turnover assets ratio. The results of these ratios were given, and finally the earning per share ratio indicate the shareholder returns on profit after tax. This ratio was computed, and it indicates that shareholders have not enjoyed good returns during the study period because this ratio was computed and this ratio was not satisfactory. The ratio was very poor, and they have not enjoyed good returns during the study period. These are the other ratios we have given. IFCO failed to improve the profitability performance as viewed from total assets. So with regard to total assets, working capital, so there is a conservative financing policy and shifted to aggressive financing policy. You know about what is conservative, what is aggressive financing policies, and finally the IFCO failed to improve the profit performance as viewed from total assets. So market value add is also given. Results were also they're analyzed in results. So therefore, IFCO on the fixed assets were utilized effectively in some of the years. Management of IFCO did not put adequate efforts to turn out the total assets effectively. That is also with regard to based on the ultimate Z-score values, we have found the results. The IFCO was in two healthy zone in 9 years out of 10 years. If IFCO didn't maintain the financial health, it was in third situation. The last year of study, IFCO was in health zone as per its Z-score. The last year of study, it was health zone as per Z-score. It is uncertain to predict that IFCO could become bankrupt. On the whole, Z-score values were never below 1.8 during the entire period of study. It is good sign to the management of IFCO. So that is one such observation made based on the ultimate Z-score value. So these are the results of hypothesis tested, and based on that results, some of the hypotheses are accepted, and when they are accepted, they become we can make the alternative hypothesis. These are all the results of the hypothesis. Then, based on all the findings and the hypothesis results, certain suggestions were offered, and one is the IFCO can be converted into favorable leverage when it employs long-term funds, and already it is mentioned debt is cheaper source than equity capital. The IFCO shall be made a balanced capital structure so that it can reap the benefits of leverage. That is another suggestion. And with regard to it has to maintain operating leverage, reasonable operating leverage. IFCO shall borrow debt optimally leading to stability. So that is also another important suggestion given. So based on the combined leverage also, operating and financial leverage shall always be operated in positive trends, and the benefits, the investment in fixed assets shall be proportionately increased to current assets. That is also important. The benefits of the stakeholders and shareholders, thereby improving the confidence among them. Another suggestion is to avoid the poor solvency condition by increasing the reserves and surplus. Based on other utilization aspects, IFCO shall take stringent measures to adequately maintain the long-term funds to finance the fixed assets requirement and to maintain the standard norms, thereby increasing the productivity, can improve the sales revenue. That is also another suggestion. With regard to gross block, also suggestion is based on all findings. Suggestions are given. Besides the annuity method, to adopt a straight line method also, that is another suggestion is given. And to avoid inconsistency depreciation policy, depreciation to gross block and depreciation to sales have to be adjusted. That is another suggestion. To avoid unnecessary, so it was found that the unnecessarily working funds are blocked up. That can be avoided, and the inventory can be optimized. New techniques can be applied that VED vital, essential, and desirable VED technique and JIT just in time approach and FN fast, slow, and non-moving items. That techniques can be applied to optimize the inventory and to collect the cash collections from trade, adopting proper cash planning methods to avoid irregular behavior of cash collections. These are all based on the findings. These suggestions were offered. Shall speed up the collections of debts. That is also important. So because the collections were poor, that is speed up accelerate the cash collections, and the prudent cash planning methods they can be adopted and maintain cash and bank balance at least 5 to 10% as suggested by the financial wizards and experts. And liquidity performance shall be improved by maintaining the ratio because it was less than 2:1 in some of the years. And the quick ratio and actual liquidity and technical liquidity, both performances poor. Therefore, they have to be improved. And where market added value of IFCO was negative, hence the shareholders wealth was vitiated. So therefore, management shall initiate financial engineering and engineering innovative methods, engineering means financial engineering innovative methods and effective marketing strategies to turn the market value added on positive line to strengthen the shareholder wealth. So this is important suggestion. And improve the inventory to so based on the individual ratios also, some of the suggestions are given. Striking balance between internal equities and the external equities is important, and the necessary steps to utilize the current and fixed assets for better productivity. So when the current and fixed assets are utilized effectively, there is a better productivity. The management shall put concerted efforts to improve the profit performance, and the management of IFCO shall focus more on the financial indicators. So financial indicators, they are very important because whether the organization is in healthy zone or too healthy zone or low healthy zone, so that there are different zones are there. So therefore, they have to focus on indicators of ultimate Z score, so that whether the value, though there is a positive Z score value at present, so that the financial health could be stronger and more vibrant. So when it is followed, the indicators which we have discussed already, there are 5 indicators. Based on indicators, if the key indicators, they are the key indicators on which the financial performance or financial health of a company can be decided, whether it is in a too healthy zone or less than healthy zone. And the least score may be is 1.8. For different scores are there. Least score is 1.8. If it is less than 1.8, it is a very poor performance. So therefore, the management could concentrate on these indicators, so that so at present, though no doubt that there is a positive value there in some of the years based on these indicators, but anyhow, to improve somewhat better the value, that is the positive that score value at present is positive. And it must be improved, and the management could concentrate on these indicators, so that financial health could be made more stronger and more vibrant. So ultimately, the wealth of the shareholders is maximized. there will be a productivity of capital employed, and so no doubt when financial health of the company is improved, not only the shareholder, all the stakeholders of the organization are definitely benefited, and the overall financial performance of the company. When overall financial performance of the company is better, automatically all shareholders and stakeholders of the organization could be benefited at large. And finally, so any research, so we cannot end with the suggestions, but we have to offer certain new vistas or new areas for further research. What are the new areas for further research? And when we have from the researchers' contribution, when we have identified the new areas for further research, so the prospective researchers can undertake some of the topics. They can alter the scope and other the methodologies, and think they can move with their new innovative ideas. They can also develop objectives and formulate the hypothesis and design the research design more effectively, and based on this scope for further research. And so the researcher has given here the financial analysis of select units of Indian Farmers Fertilizers Cooperative Limited. So it has three units are there, and so the case study was undertaken, the IFCO as a whole. So that is was undertaken, and now there are individual units, and the analysis can be done on individual units of IFCO also. That is there is one scope for one new vista for further research and analysis of working capital in Indian Farmer Fertilizers Cooperative Limited. So working capital is also a big the researchers can do. But here information not only shall be gathered from the annual reports, but the researcher has to collect the in the case of a case study, no doubt that the researcher has to collect data from primary data, but in the case of working capital, the structured schedules or mail questionnaires could be prepared, or sometimes interview methods are also beneficial to the researchers to extract more, to cull the more information, to extract the more information from the respondents, so that could go better results. That is another area. And third one is liquidity and profitability performance of Indian fertile, and close observation with regard to liquidity and profitability. What is the impact of liquidity and profitability? And no doubt that liquidity and profitability are the twin objectives of working capital management. So liquidity and profitability are twin objectives of working capital management. So, and a very depth study on liquidity position and profitability position. What is the impact of liquidity? How profitability is affected by this liquidity performance? So, could be studied by the in-depth analysis can be made by the researcher. So, this is one way of another area of research, that is liquidity and profitability performance of Indian farmers. So, impact of capital structure planning on profitability. So, this is so Indian farmer fertilizers. So, capital structure planning, because we have seen that if there is no judicious mix of capital structure, when capital structure is imbalanced, when capital structure is lopsided, when there is no judicious mix of debt and equity, when debt and equity ratio calculated ratio is not coincided, there are so many consequences and implications on the farm. And what is the impact of capital structure planning on profitability? Because ultimately the profitability is the consequential area. So therefore, what is its capital structure impact on profitability? So these in this organization, these are some of the areas were given, and based on this also the budding researchers are and the fresh research scholars or prospective researchers who put their innovative ideas, they can develop some more innovative topics, and they can contribute much better to the the society or on the to the content, valuable contribution to the existing literature, and which is useful to improve the financial performance of this the study, that is the Indian Farmers Fertilizers Cooperative Limited. So this is the area for scope for further research. So thank you. So this is the one such write-up that is undertaken, and so the how the statement of the problem, the objectives are set, hypotheses are formulated, how they were tested, what are the different ratios were calculated, and the new area, and that is market value added approach and ultimate Z score. So these are important areas. So in the financial performance area. So not by traditional way, somewhat a deviant way. That's because for making the in-depth analysis, and because it is a case study, an in-depth and a comprehensive analysis, and thorough examination and scientific investigation could be made on the case study. That's why the market value added approach and other approach, that is ultimate Z score indicators, were taken on the what is their impact on the overall financial performance of this organization has been studied, and the conclusions and suggestions were offered. And so this is how the case study was selected, and how it was analyzed and interpreted, and findings were given, and based on the findings and the conclusions, suggestions were offered, and finally the scope for further research is displayed. Thank you very much for all the participants for having listened very patiently, and thank you very much.
Sir, excuse me,
Thank you very
sir.
much, Professor. Thank you.
Thank- I thank Dr. Gurmukh Garu, Professor and Head of the Department, and Professor Vinayak Murthy Garu, for having given me this nice opportunity.
Sir,
Thank you very
excuse
much,
me, sir.
Professor.
Excuse me, sir. Hello, excuse me, sir.
Sir.
Sir, can you show the objectives and hypotheses of this case study? How can one write hypotheses and objectives?
Okay, sir, I will go back. These are the objectives of the study, sir. So to examine the financial structure of IFCO, to evaluate the performance of fixed assets, and to assess the performance of working capital and profitability, to analyze the overall financial performance through market value added approach and ultimate Z score values. These are the four objectives set. So one is related to financing decision, another is related to other two objectives related to the financing, the investment, and part of the on the investment decision, that is fixed assets and working capital, and finally profitability. The new that is this is the last objective is with regard to market value added and ultimate Z score.
Sir, and hypothesis, sir?
I
Can
will
we
show.
write null hypothesis, sir, for this?
I will show. I will show, sir. These are the hypotheses of the studies.
Sir, if there is no significant difference in the profitability performance, that means can we apply any statistics for this testing of hypothesis?
Oh, we can apply, sir. We can apply. See here, the researcher had applied the t-test for the this testing the hypothesis. That's why the table was also shown. The significance and insignificance and t-test values were shown. And finally, after conclusions, after findings, the results of hypothesis were also presented. I have shown that slide also. That was also displayed. That is the results of hypothesis
Yes,
tested.
sir. Yes, sir.
Tested.
Sir, one more
Because
thing is,
there were sub hypotheses. That's why I have scrolled, because due to possible time, each and every didn't results were not shown, and there was results of hypothesis. The slides were prepared, and at the end, before offering the sessions, that slide was displayed.
sir, in that case, if secondary data is available, can we apply for case study for secondary data, or only first primary data we can use case study?
So when we have undertaken financial performance of this type of organizations, any organizations, so exclusively primary data is not sufficient. So no doubt qualitative analysis is involved for certain social science studies. But when we have taken this type of institutions and would like to know the financial performance of the organization, so that ratio technique has to be applied, and that's why there are these relations are interrelated, and to know the performance of each. That is, one is capital structure performance, other one is liquidity performance, and fixed assets performance and profitability performance. We have to collect the second data. Researcher has to collect the secondary data, so they have to prepare the condensed the profit and loss accounts and balance sheets, and they have to recast, and from that they have to prepare the common size profit and loss account and balance sheets have to be prepared by the researcher. When he has prepared the common size profit and loss account and balance sheets, because it is a time series analysis applied for 10 years period, and based on those, so some of the ratios are based purely on profit and loss account. Some ratios based on the balance sheet. Some ratios are based on, one variable is based on profit and loss account, and one variable based on balance sheet. So suppose you take, for example, current ratio. So both variables would be taken from the balance sheet, current assets by current liabilities. And if you take this the net profit ratio, that the both will be profit and loss account. Some ratios are there. The one variable will be taken from the profit and loss account. One variable will be taken from the balance sheet. Therefore, the secondary data is also essential. One would like to make the in-depth study, even for the case studies of, as in the case of commerce and management students who have who are pursuing the research and case study method. So the secondary data is also essential. Only so the perceptions of the executives, only opinions of the executives are what policies are made, and what methods are they following, what inventory control techniques are there being followed. That time, what cash management methods are there, for practices are being followed by the organization. For such things, capital structure policies and planning, that's for such issues. So no doubt that even for dividendation is for whether the stable dividend policy or different what policies they are made. For that interviewing method or personal discussions or the questionnaire, mail questionnaire or schedule. So questionnaire, there is a difference between questionnaire and schedule, as you know. The schedule means directly the student should go on canvas and he has to collect the data. And questionnaire, he can mail and he can gather the data, and that data must be culled and interpreted, analyzed and interpreted. No, secondary data is also essential.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Actually, the secondary data is more useful for in-depth analysis rather than first-hand information.
Yes, yes. For particularly, researcher cannot rely upon only on primary data. Primary data gives only for certain what policy matters, what techniques they are being adopted. That researcher can gather the opinions of the executives because they have rich experience in the organization, and some of the sessions can also be taken from those executives also. He can, based on that information, and he can also interpret that questionnaire, and with his interaction with those executives and respondents, he can offer some more suggestions and some more techniques, some more innovative methods can be suggested. So that for which the primary data is more useful. But to analyze the performance in depth, we cannot avoid secondary data.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir.
Professor, very nice and detailed presentation.
Sir, namaste, sir. Namaste, sir. Tell me.
Sir, I have one doubt. In manufacturing industries, we are follow ideal current ratio 2:1. But what about the service industry? Any standard is there?
Service industries, so for certain service industries, of late some standards are fixed, but based on the review of literature and some indicators, and they have their own expectations and indicators. That indicators can be taken, and our computed ratios or computed analysis can be compared with the standards fixed by some of the service sector institutions.
But the standard is not there.
The actual standard, as we find in the case of literature and finance and the service sector, because the policies are changing quite frequently, and the decisions are changing and quite frequently, and because there will not be fixed standards as you find in the case of this manufacturing sector.
Okay, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Namaste, sir.
Thank you, participants. On behalf of the Department of Commerce, I would like to record my sincere thanks to our Honorable Professor for your amazing and inspiring presentation, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Dear participants, thank you very much for your valuable presentation, valuable participation, and valuable interaction. Thank you all. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Gurumurthy. Well-wisher. He is my mentor, actually. So he is my very well-wisher. I thank him. I thank all the faculty members of the department and the corporate secretaryship and other departments. So because I feel whenever I go there, Alagappa University, all faculty members, they treat me as their own faculty member. So therefore, I owe a lot. I am very much beholden to all the faculty members of the Alagappa University. Once again, I thank university authorities for having given me this nice opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for such an elaborate session, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I thank all the participants for their active participation.
Sir, please unmute the mic, sir. Please, sir. Sir, mic mute, sir.
Sir?
Sir, mic unmute பண்ணிக்கோங்க.
Are visible? Yeah.
Sir, visible.
Sir, you are audible, but sir is asking about Gurumurthy sir's mic.
Yes, sir.
Yours is audible.
I am audible. Gurumurthy, sir.
Yes. So all the session, your session is fully so impressive. All the participants have expressed their happiness. Excellent session they have expressed. So we are so happy to listen your case study lecture and the model thesis you have given, and it is a very nice illustrative session. Thank you very much.
I am very much grateful
Thank
to
you very much, sir.
this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Please. Thank you.
I shall leave, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.